Welcome to Inside Politics with Kevin Klein, beyond the headlines, beyond the spin. Straight facts, sharp analysis, and common sense conversation you won't hear anywhere else. Let's get started.
Welcome to another edition of Inside Politics. I am joined by three of my Winnipeg Sun columnist colleagues. We have Lawrence Pinsky, KC, a former human rights adjudicator as well. Royce Koop, who is a professor of political science at the University of Manitoba. And Geoff Currier, a former radio talk show host and columnist with the Winnipeg Sun. Gentlemen, I want to talk about something that's on the minds of all Canadians, and it's the big, beautiful budget. I'm stealing a little bit from Trump there for that, but I'd like to call it the big, beautiful budget. To me, I wasn't really surprised. I thought a lot of it was a rehash of what Trudeau had talked about before or was going to put forward before. But of course, that doesn't matter because Carney was assisting Trudeau or consulting Trudeau at that time. But Royce, I wanted to start with you and your thoughts on this big, beautiful budget that we have here in Canada.
Well, first, I'm sorry my voice is kind of hoarse right now. I apologize for that. But this turned out to be a pretty massive spending budget. We were told that this was going to be an austerity budget. That is not how it turned out. It's a $78 billion deficit. And of course, there's 2 points. The first is that the reason we have such a big deficit now is because Justin Trudeau consistently spent money, even in good times. When the economy was good, he would consistently run deficits. The idea is that deficits are great when you need to, when the economy is tanking, when you're going into a recession, when you need to boost things. But when you consistently deficit spend, like Justin Trudeau did, we end up in a situation today where the deficit is quickly getting to the point where it might be unmanageable. The second point is it seems that what was advertised as an austerity budget became much more of a spending budget in order to ensure that the NDP would support it, and that's what's actually happened. I think there was enough talk that the NDP could potentially defeat the budget, that there were changes, and now this is a budget that the NDP can vote for in good faith, I think.
Yeah, I think that they'll absolutely vote for that. And, there's other things going on in the House of Commons. And maybe we'll move to Geoff on this point. The NDP look like they are going to support it, and the Bloc, of course, has put forward some amendments. But Pierre Poilievre had a little misstep when it came to putting forward the conservative amendments, Geoff.
Yeah, this was not a little misstep. This was a colossal political blunder on Pierre Poilievre's part. In Parliament, the way it works, when the budget is tabled, the opposition leaders have a chance to rise in the House and present their amendments to the budget. Poilievre, in his response, a 25-minute response to the budget, somehow forgot to present the Conservatives' amendments. And so now they can't offer any amendments to this budget. They can offer sub-amendments to anything that the Bloc might put forward. This was a huge missed opportunity on Pierre Poilievre's part. And also, Royce is correct about the spending. The federal government has plans to reduce operational spending, but in terms of capital costs, the spending continues. The projected deficit, by the government's own figures, by the end of the decade, our national debt will be approximately $1.6 trillion. And our interest costs in the last year of this decade, 2029-30, our interest costs alone on the part of the federal government will be in excess of $76 billion. This is a tax and spend government. We were promised a bold budget. We didn't get it.
I think that this budget is hugely problematic, and it's endemic and emblematic of the fact that Carney thinks he's running the Politburo. It's all about central planning. The structure of the economy, still, problem with building pipelines, still a problem with building a whole bunch of things. He's restricting that. His central Politburo will decide which 5 or 10 projects will go ahead. That sort of central planning does not work. So that's the first thing to note. And that's what this budget it does represent that. It represents, as both Geoff and Royce said, $78 billion, almost $80 billion of deficit. Geoff is entirely right on what it shows in terms of our interest payments. And I would correct one thing that I think it was Royce said. It's not just Trudeau. Mr. Carney, 5 years ago, became his major financial architect. And really, it reveals the same type of nonsense that our children and maybe our grandchildren, if Canada actually still exists at that point in time, are going to have to pay for. So I think it's a major problem. As for Mr. Poiliev, who missed that initial opportunity, don't know what that was about. He didn't call me. So I can't speak to that. It does on its face seem like an error, in fairness, but maybe there was some strategy behind it that I just don't know. But one other thing to say, the Keynesian concept of spend in bad times is one thing, but the problem is Mr. Carney did it in good times under Trudeau, and it becomes like an addiction, a crack addiction. And that's the problem. And it's something that, as I said, will be paid for many, 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 many years, exceeding our healthcare spending. And it will have a huge negative impact. Somebody else wrote, and I thought this was really interesting. This is step one. The next 2-year budgets, they say, will have to be austerity because this one isn't, which means cuts to transfer payments and other problems. And I think that's a very insightful comment. Because this alone will not fix our economy. It will actually add poison to it.
Well, this was touted.
Kevin, can I just jump in here very quickly? One of the things that Mark Carney was elected to do, apart from getting a deal with the United States, was to address cost of living. And this budget is an absolute failure in terms of helping the average Canadian with cost of living. The tax relief is minuscule for the average Canadian. And so these two big prongs of his election campaign were get a deal with the Americans and help with cost of living. And he's fallen down on both of those files.
But it was sold as a nation building budget. And I think there was a lot of hype put behind the fact that they're going to be, spending more money on housing, to the likes that we've never seen since World War II and other nation building projects. And one of the ones that keeps coming up with this nation building projects is the, speed train that is supposed to go between Toronto, Montreal, and Quebec City. I don't see a lot of the nation building projects that we had hoped for, which were the pipelines. There was talk of the development of the Churchill port and the other projects they talked about, including that train. I think these are years away. It's going to be years before we see any return on the money being spent. And that's what bothers me, is because how long can we sustain this type of spending, especially if we don't have a deal with our biggest trading partner, and that's the United States.
Though let's remember, this budget comes in November when most of the fiscal year is done. Most of this money has been spent. Ask yourself, what do we have to show for it? Very little, if not nothing. And the whole concept of central planning, a Mandarin or a member of the Politburo in Ottawa is going to decide this project, yes, this no, let's build a bureaucracy, is not a way to build an economy. That's not how you fight the economic war that Canada finds itself in.
I'm going to play a clip here of a Canadian official who's talking about the trade with the United States as part of this budget and really telling, I think, the truth to people, which, I'll play the clip for you and you can listen for yourself.
Exports of other countries to the United States, particularly China, the European Union, and Canada, down sharply. You are seeing, at the same time, you're seeing countries trying to increase their trade with non-U.S., with other countries. China has very impressively actually pretty much filled, they exports to the U.S. down a lot. They've increased their exports to Southeast Asia, to Europe. It's largely replaced the lost. Now for Canada, that's a lot harder. 75% of our trade is with the United States. You do see some increase in our trade with other countries, but we can't replace 75%. Because we are so integrated with the United States. Our actually average tariff rate with U.S. is comparatively low, 6%, around 6%, which is low by global standards. But as I said, 75% of our trade is with the United States. Our economies are so integrated. Many products are produced across the border multiple times before they're a final product. So yeah, it's going to be a bigger adjustment for us than for anyone else.
So, Royce, clearly, this gentleman feels that we cannot replace the trade with the United States. I tend to agree with him 100%. And this is certainly going to not only affect, as Geoff said, our lifestyle, if you will, our cost of living. It's going to hit inflation and it's going to hit interest rates.
Yeah, yeah. Imagine how easy it is, how easy it's been, especially since the 1980s, to ship goods to the United States. You just put them on trucks and they head down. And imagine how comparably hard it is to ship our products to other countries across the ocean on both sides, and the lack of infrastructure that we have to do that. And so I think Canadians ask themselves, Carney is right. Like transitioning from an export economy focused to the United States to other countries is going to take massive transformation for the Canadian economy of infrastructure. And Canadians need to ask themselves, is there any sense that that's the case in this budget? It doesn't strike me that that's the case. And I also want to say that I think Geoff mentioned there were cuts in this budget as well to the operational spending, which is a new Carney thing that we have to keep in mind when we look at budgets now. But some of the cuts, there were cuts to the public prosecution service in Canada. That's where you're cutting. Holy cow, please spend money in that area. That
Yeah.
we desperately need more money there. That's a huge mistake, I think. I do not understand what they were thinking with respect to that. Holy cow.
I think he was making cuts for the sake of making cuts, because when you read into that, those cuts are going to take a couple of years to happen. People have short memories, so I don't know how that's going to happen. They're going to offer buyouts to some employees that are probably close to retirement, so that's still going to cost you a lot of money, and so on. But I think what Carney doesn't really address, in my opinion, is the fact that, and you've all talked about it, is how are we going to continue to pay for the interest? How do we continue to pay the interest rate for all this money that we have? And why is it that during this time, it looks like the Liberals have been trying to court some members of Parliament to cross the floor? I thought we were going to see on Twitter that Royce Koop had decided to cross the floor and join the Green Party. But
Oh,
we do know of one so far. There's been many others on Twitter, people that don't actually even exist. But we do know of one so far that's crossed the floor. What does this say about the future of budgets that could come out? Because I mean, he's building himself. Carney is building himself one person at a time towards a majority government.
I mean, there's lots of things that could be said here. I think the real problem with this is a point that Michael Chong made, the member of Parliament, said Canadians gave Mark Carney a mandate for a minority government. When you're the leader of a minority government, you have to bring the opposition parties on board. You have to be consensual, and that's what he's got. And this whole idea that you can kind of poach MPs over, you can use these kind of underhanded methods to add to your caucus until actually you've transformed the mandate that Canadians gave you into a majority government. That's pretty concerning. And from a democratic perspective, I don't like that very much at all. It's a bad precedent.
I
As a former politician, I got to tell you, what bothers me most about this is that you weren't elected for you, especially when it's a party politics race. You're not elected for you. You're elected for your party. So you won the election under the banner of the Progressive Conservatives or the Conservative government in Canada under Pierre Poilievre, and you've turned your nose up to those residents that voted for you and got you into office. My idea is that if you want, and this is me as a former party politician, if you want to change teams, that's fine, but step down and run again under a different team. Don't do it while you're in there so you can continue to get all the benefits that the residents elected you to get, but you're not really representing your area any longer.
so
Always
parliament.
come back to, sorry, go ahead, Lawrence.
I was just going to say that parliamentary prostitution like this has been part of our system for many, many years. This is nothing new. It may be distasteful, but it's consistent with, as they say, the oldest occupation, perhaps the second oldest occupation. So it's distasteful, but it's common. Belinda Stronach did this years ago. So it's part of the risk. In fact, the Conservatives unfortunately have lost two. One who switched teams, which was rather it's fair to say it's despicable, but it is part of the system. And the other one that did a slightly more honorable thing by saying he's going to resign. I think he said in the spring or something.
Yeah, March.
In March. Hopefully that'll be spring. It's cold in Winnipeg today, I'll tell you. But in any event, so that's what he said. I thought that was more honorable. I don't understand it. The fellow from Nova Scotia seemed to be disgruntled because he didn't get the position he wanted. He clearly talks out of both sides of his mouth. I think he was the only Conservative in Nova Scotia. I suspect that won't be the case next time around. Usually the electorate does not honor or respect people who do this. So
I'm okay with you saying that it's normal practice, but it doesn't make it right.
Agreed.
You were elected under a banner. You are supposed to fly that flag. That's who they elected you to be their conservative representative. You don't get to pick and choose to better yourself. Like I've heard rumors from some people on the Hill that he might become the fisheries minister. That might have been part of the game, right? That only helps him. That doesn't help his community in any way, shape, or form. So whether it's right, whether it's been done for a long time, I certainly, again, as a former party politician, I don't think that's right. You dance with who you came to the dance with. Geoff, sorry, you wanted to go in there too.
When Belinda Stronach, I'm reminded when Belinda Stronach crossed the floor from the Conservatives to the Liberal Party, I asked a Conservative MP, what would Deef have said? Referring to the late John Diefenbaker, and he gave me his Deef impression. It was something like, the average level of intelligence has just gone up on both sides of the house, which is pretty much what Deef might have said.
Now, Royce, as the political sciences professor, what are your thoughts on? And I know you wrote a column in the National Post on this topic of crossing the floor. Let me share a little bit of that with us.
Yeah, well, I think the MP is Chris d'Entremont, and the explanation that he gave for why he crossed the floor is because he's a red Tory. He's more of a centrist Tory. He's not comfortable under the leadership of Pierre Poilievre. And my thought was that this explanation had been accepted kind of uncritically. You know, they say, okay, yeah, that makes sense, and it's because it jives with kind of central Canadian elite wisdom that Pierre Poilievre is this kind of hard right figure. But I think we need to kind of be critical of d'Entremont's explanation. He's running 3 elections. He ran under Andrew Scheer. There's lots of kind of centrist Tories in the caucus who've come to Poilievre's defense that actually work well with Poilievre. And so that leads to the question, what did the government promise d'Entremont? You know, we never got a clear answer to that. He kind of reframed a question. He said, well, I wasn't offered a spot in the cabinet. You know, that was his response. But there's lots of other inducements that you can give someone to cross the floor, and no one has answered that question. I'd really like to see an answer to that question.
And that's the reason right there why they should not allow you to cross the floor.
A few months ago, this same person gave a full-throated endorsement of Pierre, just a few months ago. So the fact that now he says he suddenly found himself, he looked in the mirror and found himself as a red Tory that didn't agree is exactly as you said, Royce. It's just, it's really nonsense, and maybe it appeals to the CBC and certain other mainstream media, but and others maybe, an elite in Central Canada, but it's just a self-rationalization and utter nonsense.
Well, it certainly was promoted by the mainstream media and CBC, right? They started counting down how many more seats Mark Carney had to go until he had a majority government. So they played right into that. Of course, showing him walking into his first caucus meeting with the prime minister himself and, all of the accolades and the cheers and such. That, to me, again, is just the media trying to solidify or glorify what had happened there and not really telling the whole story. Like, I haven't seen a media yet that has gone into his riding and asked people what they think.
There was somebody, no, there was somebody I heard.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Have you? Okay.
Yeah, there was somebody who said it's despicable and the most, the biggest sellout that he had ever heard in his, I can't remember how many decades of service in politics. I heard that chap say that. So, and it is, and there's a reason I called this parliamentary prostitution. That's what it is. I don't think there'll be a happy ending here, though. I think it's going to be very upsetting for everyone in that riding, and I expect that riding will turn next time around.
Remember,
well, certainly. Go ahead.
When Belinda Stronach crossed, I mean, obviously it was bad for the party. It was good for the Liberal government, but it also had a kind of interesting effect on the Conservative caucus. It was mobilizing. It was kind of a galvanizing thing. They were angry about it, and it actually kind of solidified the party. It was good for the party, and so, I think we want to keep our eyes out for that. That whole spectacle of Don Tremont walking into the Liberal caucus room, big smile, all the MPs cheering and clapping. It's, oh wow, what did you do? What are you clapping for? It could have an unexpected effect. I could see that happening.
Well, we'll have to watch. We know that the budget's likely to pass this time, so we can't make any speculation there. It does look like it's going to pass, but I'm sure we'll have lots to talk about as it pertains to the budget and some of the big beautiful budget and any of the nation building projects that they're talking about. Gentlemen, thank you very much for this. Look forward to talking to you on our next subject. I want to bring up with the team here the poppy scandal, as I like to call it, or Poppy Gate, that is going on in Canadian courts. So we'll turn to Lawrence and find out why this is allowed and how we can stop it. Have a great day.
Thanks for watching Inside Politics with Kevin Klein. Please like and subscribe to this channel and visit thewinnipegsun.com for more.